So, there's been comments from people about what the Blackhawks can do to get back. And it's not easy. This is the team that finished first in the West. This is a team that has been dominant in the regular season the last couple of years and then failed to get it done in the postseason. So, I'm on capfriendly.com looking at the Blackhawks right now. Patrick Kane is going nowhere. We know that. Patrick Kane is a Blackhawk forever. So his $10.5 million will stay on the cap. Kane's their best player. People want to argue with me about that, fine. Argue with me in the comments below. But he is. Jonathan Toews, captain, face of the franchise, 29 years old, $10.5 million cap hit for years and years to come. That cap hit is no longer justified by his offensive or defensive contributions. Cap hit is way too high. And it makes it this is the thing. When your team wins a Stanley Cup, or in Chicago's case, wins 3, the asking price of these core guys is going to go through the roof. Because they say, hey, we won it all. We're the best. We should be paid like it. And they're right. I'm not debating Taves' contract when it was signed. I'm saying right now, it doesn't look good for the Blackhawks. So what do you trade Taves for? That's the question. Taves is a center. He's a first-line center. You look for a team that's looking to get back into the playoffs and has cap space. I'm looking at you, Carolina. Carolina would also have young pieces. Potentially, blue line pieces that Chicago could be looking for with both Oduya and Campbell headed for UFA status. Maybe a blue liner, maybe a top draft pick. Carolina has the number 12 draft pick in this year's draft, so potentially that gets thrown in. It's not a great draft, but it's all about getting the right pieces. So Taves, to me, is the obvious one. But Marian Hossa is 38. He's got 4 years left on his contract, $5.275 million a year. It's a lot of money. Marian Hossa, fantastic player this year. But when you lose in the first round twice in a row, maybe Hossa's contract goes somewhere. Maybe you find a team in an Arizona situation where they'll take on a bad cap hit just to get over the cap floor. And I'm not sure where you send Hossa to, but Hossa is eligible to be sent somewhere else. Now, I should also state this. Both Taves and Hossa have no movement clauses, as do Anisimov and Kane. And Anisimov's agent really should be commended for getting Anisimov a no-movement clause. So the real trick for Chicago, for Stan Bowman, is going to be getting rid of these guys, having them agree to waive their no-movement clause, to move somewhere else, especially if they're going somewhere that they're not likely to win as many games, like a Carolina. Anisimov, $4.5 million for the next 4 years. No movement clause. He's 28. He's not going anywhere. Anisimov played relatively well for them this year. He's not going anywhere. Kruger at $3 million for 2 more years. It's a bit high, but again, you're going to pay more for guys who've won Stanley Cups, and he has one on his. I think he has one. I'm not sure if he has 2 or not. I know he has 1. John Hayden's still on an entry level for 1 more year. Nick Schmaltz is on an entry level for 2 more years. Yurko and Panik are free agents. Panik's going to get a big raise. Panik's due for a big raise. So does Chicago give him that big raise? Or does Chicago potentially trade him to, say, a Las Vegas franchise who can give him that big raise and give back a draft pick prospect or some older player they pick up when they do the expansion draft? It's going to have to be creative. And Panik was great for Chicago this year. But again, if you can't talk those guys into getting rid of or if you can't talk the top 4 guys into letting up on their no movement clauses, especially Taves, Hossa, and I guess Anisimov, I can't see Anisimov being moved. So don't flame me, Blackhawks fans. I'm not saying he's going to go anywhere. But it's tricky. Because if you move Panik, you have to move somebody in who's going to score as much as he did, and in key times. Panik was or Panic. I guess he goes by Panic now. It was Panik for years. Now it's Panic again. Richard Panic. He's probably going to get, 20 goals gets you about 2.5 to 3 million now. And if the Blackhawks can't move those top five, any of those top five guys who make, let's see, it's 32 million between the top five forwards in terms of pay. So, they kind of need more guys on the lesser end in terms of money, which is what's killing them. So it's going to be tricky. Hartman still has one more year left, so he's not going anywhere. Panarin's got his $6 million contract kicking in next year. He's got 2 years at a $6 million contract. That's a lot of money. Panarin's worth it. But again, because that $6 million kicks in, Panic's gone. Desjardins, he's UFA. He's not coming back. Tutu's got one more year at $700,000. It doesn't matter. He probably comes back. I still think he's expansion fodder. Hinostroza, $717,000 next year. Tanner Kiro has 2 more years left at $750,000. And Dennis Rasmussen, his RFA status is this summer. So we'll see what happens there. On the blue line, you got Brent Seabrook. Seabrook at 32 and with forever left on his contract, if you could move him, I think it would be smart. You have to get a defenseman back, though. It's the trick. You have to get a defenseman back because behind him you have Keith, you have Hjalmarsson, then you have Oduya, who's UFA, Campbell, UFA, Forsling, who's 20 and has 2 more years left on his entry level, Van Riemsdyk, who has 1 more year left at $825,000, Kempny, who's RFA, and Roosevelt, who has another year at $650,000. Roosevelt's a number 7 defenseman. You don't want to be putting him in and giving him top 4, top 5 minutes. You want him to stay down there. And in goal, you have Crawford, and right now, Jeff Glass shows up as the backup on their depth chart just because Darling's out. Crawford has $6 million on his contract for the next 3 years after this one. So next year, they're already at $70 million with 20 players signed on their roster and 34 contracts. They've got $70 million. Now, the salary cap is projected to go up by a couple million. So let's say they have $5 million to play with. They've really got to move that out. They've got to move some guys out because they don't have enough money to sign everybody. And I mean, Kempney's going to get a raise, somewhat of a raise. As I said, Panic's going to get a raise. Yurko, I don't even know if they're going to keep Yurko. But you want some play under the cap. You don't want to go into next year with the exact same team you've got this year. Now, what they're showing on the minors. So these are the guys who could come up and make a difference for Chicago next year. Tyler Mott still shows as minor on here, $925,000 for next year and the year after. So he's still eligible to fill in as a cheap replacement. Ville Polka is an RFA this summer. He's not going to get a big raise. Alex DeBrincat, his junior career is over this year. I really, really think DeBrincat makes a run at the lineup next year because Chicago needs a DeBrincat to be ready. I said last summer after the draft that I felt he was going to be a steal. Dahlstrom, Svedberg, Graham Knott, Norrell, Johnson, Dylan Fernier. This list just goes down. It's just a list of guys who are signed to contracts. And I don't look at this and see anybody else who jumps out at me as NHL ready. So Chicago has a problem. And, okay, focus camera. The main problem seems to be you've got a lot of guys making a lot of money at the top. And you've got the bottom, all these guys on entry level or prove-it contracts. They don't have those middle guys. I look at Nashville, St. Louis, Edmonton, Anaheim. I look at all the other teams in the West that are still playing. They all roll 4 lines. Chicago, when they won the Cup, rolled 4 lines. And there were competent players on all 4 lines who could win in the playoffs, and you knew could win in the playoffs. In their rush to bring in the young guys, to fill in and stay under the cap, which is a lot of what this is. They lose that competitive edge on the 3rd and 4th line. They lose that. And what Chicago has to do in this offseason if they're going to get back into it. And I've had a couple Hawks fans on my channel say, well, are they ever going to win a cup again? Not as they stand right now, no. I think this was the last kick at the can for this group. I'm not saying Kane won't get one again as a Blackhawk. I'm saying that this core, you have to shake it up. And what they did in firing Mike Kitchen and getting rid of Scott Darling, because Darling's contract is up. I didn't say Steve earlier, did I? I'm asking my whiteboard as if my whiteboard's going to give me answers. Scott Darling. Okay. In terms of what Chicago has and doesn't have, they have a lot of names, a lot of decent players, but the league's getting younger, faster, and deeper, and the Hawks seem to be getting older, thinner on the talent end of things, and easier to play against. So they have to be able to turn, whether they're able to move one of the guys at the top, whether it's Taves or Hossa, they got to move somebody, or somebody wants to take Kruger, because you have to at this point if you want to stay under the cap and be competitive. Nashville exposed something in Chicago in the postseason. Nashville's playing fantastic. They're up 2-1 on St. Louis at the time that I'm making this. But being swept in the first round means you have to make changes. And if you stay the same and you go, we're going to stay the course, you're doing exactly what Vancouver did in 2012 when the Kings took them out when they were the President's Trophy winners. If there was a time for the Canucks to change their core, get rid of the Sedins, and make some wild, crazy moves to stay competitive, that would have been the time. This is that time for Chicago. Because 5 years ago, the Sedins didn't look old. They didn't look slow. Right now, Taves doesn't look old and slow. But 5 years from now, he'll be in his mid-30s, and he's still making $10.5 million a year. And as tough as it is to trade that money right now, it's going to be a lot tougher all those years down the road. So here's my challenge to Chicago fans, from a Dallas, Vancouver, Boston fan. How do you do it? I mean, if DeBrincat comes in and plays the way that Braden Point did at the end of the year for Tampa this year, as an unheralded, not expected to be ready quite yet forward, they're good, right? But Chicago's got a massive challenge ahead of them. They can't keep looking back. They can't keep saying, well, we were great at this time, so we can keep this team together because they'll do it again. Hossa or Taves? Potentially Seabrook. Potentially Kruger if anybody wants that money. Then they can keep Panic. And then in free agency, maybe they pick up somebody else. But you've got to start with trading out somebody from that core, because that core is not going to work and it's too expensive. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And thank you very much for watching. If you watched the St. Louis-Nashville game earlier, you saw Nashville kind of dominating things a little bit. They're looking really damn good. And we'll see if Edmonton can keep that up tonight. But for now, I'm done with this topic. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.